You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 12th of December. Doctors warn that Britain could be swamped by TB. Just 44.9% of Londoners are white British. Met wants to report crimes at counters in mosques and coffee shops. Bristol's HIV positive rapist jailed. Italy slumps in world corruption rankings. Monti says Europe must guard against resurgent nationalism. Spain receives whopping €39 billion. Obama sells 20 F-16 fighter jets to the Muslim Brotherhood. US quietly releases 8,500 criminals who were to be deported. Thought for the day, progressives, bankers, and today is the day. And finally, blind, drunk and driving. UK news. A leading doctor has warned that Britain will be swamped by tuberculosis unless new measures to diagnose the disease in immigrants are introduced. The disease, which was rife in Britain until the 1950s, is an increasing and worrying problem in urban areas. Rising immigration has seen a surge in cases in the last 20 years. Under current rules, new immigrants from countries where TB is common are required to have chest x-rays before being allowed into Britain. But doctors argue this century-old method only spots active TB once it is already destroying the lungs, meaning cases are often diagnosed far too late. Other countries, such as the US, use a blood test which can detect the latent TB in those not displaying any symptoms. Cases have fallen since this technique was introduced in 2007. At the British Thoracic Society conference this week, Peter Davis of the Liverpool Heart and Chest Hospital said urgent changes were needed to halt the decades-long rise in TB cases. He told The Times, "The tide has been coming in for 20 years. It's been getting bigger and bigger, and if we don't do something, we will be swamped with TB as we were 100 years ago." A nationalist spokesperson commented, "We have been warning of this for years, but of course have been called racist. It's bad when birds come home to roost, isn't it?" Just 44.9% of Londoners are white British, according to a census data. Census data reveals just 59% now call themselves Christian, as a quarter say they have no religion and 5% are Muslim. Less than 90% of the country is white for the first time ever. Home ownership declines, but more people have paid off their mortgages. Marriage rates dip to record low as fewer than half are married. White British people are now in a minority in London for the first time, it emerged yesterday, as census data revealed that the immigrant population of England and Wales went up by 3 million over the past 10 years. In 2011, 7.5 million residents were foreign born, making up 13%, or 1 in 8 of the population, up from 4.6 million in 2001. The total population of England and Wales was 56.1 million, a 7% increase on 2001, and 55% of the increase is due to migration. Just 3.7 million Londoners described their ethnicity as white British in 2011, down from 4.3 million in 2001 and making up 44.9% of the city's population. It is believed to be the first time that British whites have become a minority in any region of the United Kingdom. Another major change to the nation came in the decreasing number of Christians. 4 million fewer people claimed to belong to the faith, as a quarter of Britons said they had no religion. The Metropolitan Police want public to report crimes at counters in mosques and coffee shops. The Metropolitan Police is considering asking the public to report crimes at new contact points in public places such as mosques and coffee shops, as it looks to abandon traditional police station front counters. The service want to set up more than 200 of the new desks as it looks to cut back on 65 underused front counters. The force plans to save £500 million by 2015 and has already looked to sell its Scotland Yard headquarters. The plans, which are currently in consultation, could see the public reporting crimes in churches and mosques, as well as supermarkets, community centres and libraries. The force says it is considering sharing the counters with partners and placing them in other public places, as well as on existing estates. Britain's HIV-positive rapist is jailed. Britain's notorious HIV-positive rapist, Gift Veremu, has been finally jailed. Veremu was first tried in 2011 on 2 counts of rape. He should have been put away the first time, but a legal blunder allowed a juror to see an unedited police interview and forced a retrial. His teenage victim said he dragged her into a room and was too shocked to resist. The judge jailed Gift Veremu for only 8 years. One World Date reporter commented, "He was HIV positive and he knew it when he raped the teenager. He should have been tried for attempted murder and handed a much lengthier sentence." European news. Italy slumps in world corruption rankings. Global economic crisis blamed as factor. Rome. Italy has slid 3 notches to 72nd place in Transparency International's 2012 Corruption Perception Index, released Wednesday. On a 100-point scale, the country scored 42, well behind countries such as Namibia and Rwanda, according to the Berlin-based NGO, which measured perceived levels of public sector corruption in 176 countries and territories around the world. Greece, which fell to 94th place, and Italy were seen as having suffered from increased corruption amid the global economic crisis. Denmark, Finland and New Zealand were perceived as the most virtuous with 90 points each, while Afghanistan, North Korea and Somalia shared last place with 8 points each. Monti says Europe must guard against resurgent nationalism. Cannes, December the 8th. Prime Minister Mario Monti said, "Europe finds its strength from within, but we must not forget that tensions and conflicts can always be resurrected. For this reason we need to be very vigilant against every form of nationalism and populism that are now very visible in Europe." The Prime Minister was speaking on the sidelines of the World Policy Conference in Cannes. Monti reiterated that the award of the Nobel Prize to Europe is recognition of what Europe is and what Europe has done. If we have received a Nobel Prize, obviously Europe cannot be that bad. A World Date reporter commented, "I never thought I would see the day when the EU got an award. What the hell was the award for? Oh, then again, it could be for accepting the most Muslim immigrants into Europe and generally effing up the financial system, while still giving themselves expensive jollies and taking all the money out of their countries. In that case, job well done and roll on nationalism." Spain has received a whopping €39 billion. For a while, Spain can take a gulp of air while it ingests a €39 billion bailout from the EU. The €39 billion are to prop up its banking system as part of the aptly named European Stability Mechanism. Sources say that Spain's costs in financing the bailout are choking its economy and just delaying Spain's inevitable collapse. World news. Obama regime to sell 20 F-16 fighter jets to the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt. The ongoing civil strife in Egypt, its Muslim Brotherhood president's grabbing sweeping powers and a cooling of relations with Israel don't seem to be making much of an impression on the Defence Department's foreign and military aid decisions. The Obama administration is going ahead with the delivery of 20 F-16 fighter jets to the Muslim Brotherhood-led country, even as Amnesty International is calling it dangerous. President Mohamed Morsi's decision to grant the military the power to arrest civilians protesting against him. Fox News reports the 20 F-16s are part of a $1 billion foreign aid package that was promised to the previous Egyptian government. A World Date writer comments, "I guess this is in return for Mohamed Morsi's recent fascist power grab and rush to implement a new Sharia-based constitution. After all, Obama has to make sure Egypt is prepared to help wipe Israel off the map." Unwanted at home, free to strike again. The US quietly released 8,500 criminals who were supposed to be deported. Secret criminals. The US quietly released 8,500 criminals who were supposed to be deported, with deadly consequences. When the Globe requested the names of the released criminals under the Freedom of Information Act, federal immigration officials refused, saying it would be a clearly unwarranted invasion of the immigrants' privacy. Officials said public interest in their names was minimal anyway. Barrack's plan to lessen the US Army in Afghanistan. Barack Obama plans to keep a minimal force of American troops in Afghanistan after 2014. The number of ground troops set by the Obama administration could be as few as 6,000. Recent events show that this would be ridiculous due to the fact that Islamic fanatics are joining the Afghan security forces and shooting American and British troops in the back whilst on duty. A day for arresting Prime Ministers. The Prime Ministers for the Cayman Islands and Mali have been arrested. The Prime Minister of the Cayman Islands, Makiva Bush, was arrested yesterday by the Royal Cayman Island Police Force Financial Crimes Unit for corruption and abuse of power. Bush had recently visited London to discuss self-governing British territories with officials in Whitehall. Cayman officials for Mr Bush claim that although he was arrested in the early hours, no charges have been made against him. Prime Minister Cheikh Modibo Diarra of Mali was arrested in a midnight raid by the military. He was forced to announce his resignation on Mali state television. He was also forced to announce that all of his ministers were stepping down as well. Mr Diarra was made Prime Minister in April after the military government began moves to appease the civilian population. Following the military coup in March, the northern half of Mali was lost to hardline Islamist Tuareg rebels who have established a Sharia state. It is hoped Mr Diarra, as a moderate force in the country, could recover Mali's territorial integrity. Thought for the day. Progressives, bankers and today is the day. My thoughts today are centred on bankers, the common purpose idiots and our children and the end of the world. My thoughts also contain two large inputs from our European reporter and writer Imno Kafir, as they reflect my thoughts exactly. First on bankers and corporations and the New World Order, which is of course a misnomer in itself, as there's nothing new in domination and propaganda for whatever reason, cultural or religious. In fact, it is as old as the hills. Now it's well known I am not a financial person in any way. In fact, I am dyslexic when it comes to figures, and I reverse the last two numbers. But I do know enough to know that no country can do without bankers and financial whiz-kids, although the class, education and type of these have changed drastically over the years. It would appear that anyone with street smarts on figures can become a hedge fund manager, but it takes the really big silent boys at the top to wield the knives. And I quote from Abraham Lincoln, "I have two enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the two, the one in the rear is my greatest enemy." Another one from Thomas Jefferson, "I sincerely believe the banking institutions having the issuing power of money are more dangerous to liberty than standing armies." Now these two quotes are from days gone by, but apply now more than ever to our modern world, where it is not the politicians you have to worry about, but the huge banking moguls and the power they wield. It is not from the eternal sea of politics that the Antichrist will appear, but from the ever-changing but always the same financial sea. Countries are made and destroyed by money. Entire resources and jobs are shifted from one area of the world to another. Gods are made and forgotten, and man himself is just a minute pawn in the game. It is with this in mind that I still say that these institutions should be monitored by each state within each country. But then we have the large world of globalisation, which accounts for many, if not all, ills. This makes international slaves of us all. Our standing armies are being cut every day in the West, whilst huge amounts of money are being shovelled into the Middle East to build more armies. Whoever is at the root of this and other movements to internationalise and yet still diminish the West, I have my own thoughts. And whether it is the Chinese or the Arabs, there must be an awful lot of money for our own bankers to operate against their own countries to make it worth their while. It may have its roots in the Rothschilds or the Mohammeds or the Wangs, but we have to remember that in all these countries, as in ours, there are people who are just as ignorant of what is going on as we are, and they still deserve to live and fight for what they believe in their own country. We must not make the mistake of judging the general populations as we judge their financial dictators. The only ones I really dislike are the Arabs and Muslims, because their whole reason for living is to outbreed and convert and subvert in everyone else's country, and you know my opinion on that one. Meanwhile, the powers that be push countries around on a large chessboard willy-nilly, whilst prophesying the change that money will inevitably bring those countries, and our children in our schools are being propagandised from an early age. The progressives want every child to grow up to be a slave of the state. Above all else, education is the future. Traditionalists who fail to understand this will allow the educational system and the entertainment industry to transform their children into progressives. Progressives know that control of the educational system means control of the future. Without the educational system and immigration, progressives are doomed to be cafe radicals. With them, they can count the generations until they control everything. The progressives have few children of their own. Your children are their children. If they can corrupt your children, then they have a future. If they cannot, then they will go off and die in a corner. The progressives have three strengths: class warfare, cultural programming and immigration. The UK had prosperity that negated class warfare, but it neglected to safeguard its culture from the left and did not consider the consequences of third world immigration. With their political and culture power, the left destroyed prosperity, and now, with all three cards in their hands, the progressives are rising high. Cultural secession means cutting away the educational and entertainment culture of the left out of your home. It means creating your own alternative education and entertainment and grouping in communities that act as a support structure for traditional values. Is it easy? No. It involves sacrifice and being treated like a pariah by the progressives and their state lackeys. But if you care, then sacrifice is worth it. If you care, then you have no alternative. This is war, and the sooner those who disagree with the progressives realise it, the sooner we will be on the road to winning it. Meanwhile, the United Nations, or morons as I call them, are very busy transforming your kids into climate agents. Now, do your children or grandchildren have nightmares about the earth melting or exploding due to human-caused global warming? Do they believe they have no future because our planet is dying, the ice caps and glaciers are melting, the sea levels are rising, islands and coastal areas are disappearing, polar bears and children are drowning, and plant and animal species are rapidly going extinct, and extreme weather will soon make human life unbearable, if not impossible? This is frightening, not enlightening. But fear of an impending climate apocalypse apparently afflicts millions of children and adolescents worldwide. Psychologists, psychiatrists, teachers and parents report that many children are depressed and fearful, having difficulty sleeping, and believe it is pointless to study or plan a career since there is little hope for a livable future. As a result, many are experiencing serious psychological and physical health issues. Now, this is classroom child abuse for a higher cause, and parents should be made aware of it. Their children are being turned, through their global warming angst, into activism, becoming little climate warriors who will work tirelessly to convert their peers, their parents, and local and national political leaders into supporters of sustainable development. And this, clearly, is what the proponents of climate change education intend. Now, I'm not silly enough to think that both China, India and even America do not affect certain aspects of pollution with their millions of gunk being chucked out into the atmosphere. I'm also not unaware of the tons of plastic crap that will never rot, most of which is manufactured in China. Also, the deforestation of large parts of the planet for both commercial use and to feed more millions of people meat does not affect the climate. Of course it does. I'm of the opinion that nature is perfect and man is the bug. The pathetic thing is that, as with all good messages, it has been taken by the powerful and ruined, and the powerful bankers would be the last people to become Luddites and turn electricity off and make do with fossil fuels or chant around a campfire in the Arctic, let alone save the whales. It is just another method of obtaining and keeping power over future generations, much like the Marxists in this country do with our children's education. Powerful people do not want other powerful people growing up to take over. Only they're chosen ones. The rest of us just have to get on with it. They do not want children who can think for themselves, which is the whole point in my book of education, 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 not listen, listen, listen. Your children will turn out like little robots, chanting the right political line of multiculturalism, asexualisation, love for all and resistance to none. The multiculturalism applies to their prospective partners who should not be white, the asexualisation as well because they will not produce their own offspring, love for all but just to foreigners, and resistance applies to none-resisting Islam. Many able and childbearing couples do not want to bring a child into this world because of not only the financial burden but the moral one. Why? We're supposed to be living in a fairly civilised world, so what's the problem? Negative propaganda is the problem. All humans are selfish. It is a human condition. However, stupid isn't. You can never afford children, not only financially but emotionally. They are little takers just like their parents. That is what they do. If you want unconditional love fairly cheap, get a doggy or even better a cat. We in the West have bred several generations who do not think of their future, or why are we here? We are here to breed, not have reality shows, not acquire more handbags than necessary, not to drink ourselves to death, but to breed. This is the one thing that women need a man for, and of course this does not fit in with the current asexual and multicultural rubbish our children are being fed at the moment. So the future looks grim and we only have ourselves to blame. We should have taken this particular stick from the educators long ago, along with disciplining our children. I have noticed that the lack of disciplining our own has not reduced the cases of child cruelty and abuse at all. The powers that be do not want a regular ordered society based on family values, so they seek to destroy them, and where better than school. Make sure all the women have to work so they cannot do a proper job in the home. Make sure fathers are absent or ineffective. Keep everyone capable of rising up poor. Regulate and use the television as a propaganda machine. Keep methods of travel and getting together expensive. Import thousands of strangers and pay for them. This has a double whammy. First, you lose whole areas of the country, and secondly, their votes are useful. Keep the police firmly underfoot, do away with your serving forces, and then start sabotaging the main religion of a country. This is standard practice for thousands of years on a smaller scale, but still recognisable. But hey ho, what do I see? The Mayan calendar. Now that should be a doozy, because at the end of this broadcast on this day, the world ends. So all of these kids who are basket cases and adults who do not want children can be let off the hook. You're all free. I had hoped it would be aliens, all tall, dark and looking rather like Jeff Goldblum, in which case I'm first in line to be inducted by them. We could be heading for an ice age, or of course Israel could be wiped off by a nuclear holocaust. Of course we could be entering into the biblical area of Armageddon, but the fact is, if it isn't published in the Daily Mail, would any of us take any notice? No, we just continue looking at TV and waiting for the report which would never come in. Now, in case you do not know where I'm going after the news today, I'm going into the garden, well wrapped up, to see if I can find an alien spaceship, the Antichrist or the Redeemer himself, a couple of dragons and a strange woman riding them, or if all else fails, a few Mayans to belt, okay? Actually, I've just realised that the end of the Mayan calendar is the 21st of the 12th in the year 2012. Well, I told you I reverse numbers and I've just proved my point. But I'm still going in the garden tonight. You never know, there might be a Mayan who's dyslexic, like me. And finally, blind drunken driving. It can only happen in England. Scott Law, 33, who is registered blind, drank 5 bottles of wine and got behind the wheel of a family car after an argument with his partner, Suzanne Scawthorne. Ignoring the 2-year-old in the back of the car, he drove straight at Miss Scawthorne, knocking her to the ground as she walked away. She escaped with minor grazing following the incident near his home in Gainsborough, Lincolnshire. The couple then drove off, but a passer-by who witnessed the incident took down the registration number of their Peugeot 206 and contacted the police. Law was traced through his number plate and admitted to officers that he was registered blind and could not drive. This presenter says, well, after 5 bottles of wine, I'd not be able to go anywhere, let alone drive, but there you go. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozart. and I wish you all a very good night.